bribing or am I rewarding my kids? What is the difference? Let me tell you, there is a difference, and it's a fine line, but it's a clear line. So you can be confident that no, you're not doing the big bribery tactic. You are actually doing something that is good for your child. And then we're going to talk about, well, okay, if I am rewarding my child, how do I do that in the right way so that I'm not increasing extrinsic motivation, which is external motivation, and I'm not overdoing it to where the child's only doing it because of external motivation rather than doing it because they're learning to want to do the right thing, and learning to find value and enjoyment in the things that you want them to do. Okay, so let's talk about those things. All right, so two things that have been spurring my thoughts on this topic. I mean, one, I'm a mom, okay? As a homeschool mom, I definitely want to make sure I'm targeting my kids' hearts, that I'm really shepherding their hearts, and that I'm helping them to want to do the right things because it's the right thing to do. And hopefully in time, even if they may not always want to, that they learn to appreciate and enjoy and value doing things that they should do. But at the same time, finding that balance so we're not bribing them, but that we are, as needed, providing some encouragement and motivation and some physical rewards even to create a ripple effect and help them to want to, move forward in that and to grow in that area. And so, so two things that I have heard lately. One, I watched or stumbled upon a video by Jenny Phillips, and the title was something like this. It was like, why I do pay my kids to read. And I was like, whoa. And if you don't know, Jenny Phillips is the one who created the Good and the Beautiful curriculum. And so they have like a channel on YouTube that has a lot of followers. And so I'm like, wow, if she pays her kids, I'm not saying I'm going to start to necessarily, but I know that was something that, you're always afraid to pay your kids to do certain things that they should do anyway, because you don't want it to become too extrinsic. You want them to do it for the right reasons. But it was really helpful because I, was in a similar situation where, my son loves to read, but maybe there's a time, you've experienced this where you want your kid to either read more or read like at the next level, like maybe like go from pictures to chapter books. And that's where I was at. So I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to pay them because I do want to focus on intrinsic motivation. And I was kind of still like, is this bribery? Is it not? And so since then I've really cleared up the two categories. So I thought, well, I could do something kind of like that. Maybe I could do Lego points, and like assign certain books to be a certain number of Lego points. And so basically she would like say assign a certain amount of money that a book would be worth. And these are books that maybe her child wouldn't ordinarily pick to read. And so, but she knew they had great value to be read. And so to motivate them to choose those books, she would set a price point on those. And of course, this is with kids that are trustworthy, that actually are reading, and every kid's different, so you have to know your kids and what works for them. But anyway, so that motivated me to try that. And at first I set it up and he still was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to read that kind of thing. Like he would still pick the picture books. And so I was trying to get him to do this. So then I just remind him, okay, but when you're ready, these are the chapter books we've talked about, that if you choose one of these, mommy would this one is worth this many points, and etc. And then within a week or two, like he decided to break into one of the chapter books, just after several like encouragements and just kind of reminders of like this opportunity that was set before him. And once he's read the first chapter or two, it was like, I don't even have to remind him like, oh, well, today did you want to try to read that chapter book instead of just a picture book? Now it's like he's been just reading the chapter book, and I would be happy if you read the chapter book and anything else also, of course. And he's like, halfway through the book now, and I feel like it was that easy, and he broke out of that fear. And we'll see how it goes. Like, there's 9 books in the series, and we'll see if he continues the rest of the Hidden Scrolls series. It was also a series I read to him when he was younger, and he already knew he really loved it as a read aloud. So I anticipated one day he would read it to himself. And it's a bonus that I'd already read it with him, because then I could like pre-approve it. And so anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. So we want to have that balance with intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. We want to make sure we're not bribing and that we are rewarding in a fashion that is helping the child to build intrinsic motivation. We're not over rewarding but rewards are good if done correctly. So what is bribing? So bribing is when you try to get someone to do something they don't want to do by promising something. So when I read that dictionary definition, that scared me for a minute. I'm like, okay, so is any reward a bribe? Like you would reward your kids for things that they did want to do and be like, okay, that's not a bribe. But then if you reward your kid for something that maybe wasn't easy for them to do, does that mean it's a bribe? So no, it doesn't. Okay, here you go. Listen carefully. This is the difference. If in the middle of a tantrum or a crisis or an act of disobedience, your child's having a bad attitude or whatever it is, you then say, okay, here, Johnny, yeah, you can go ahead and have this screen time that you're crying about, or this ice cream that you're wanting, or you reward them or give them something to get them to stop misbehaving. That is bribing. Don't do it, okay? So that's something where I was like, okay, phew, like, you know, as a mom and a teacher, I knew like, that's a big no-no. You don't do that. If your kid is misbehaving, you don't give them the thing they want. You don't, that's actually reinforcing the bad behavior. But if your child, you set up ahead of time something that, you know, they can look forward to, that you can encourage them with, a sense of reward, and it's not constant rewards, then that is rewarding them, not bribing them. So for instance, you might know, okay, my child gives me a little bit of pushback at math. They're sometimes having a bad attitude or not in the mood. So if during that bad attitude, you're like, okay, okay, fine, you know, and you give them what they want or give them something just to get them to stop, that's a problem. But if you set up the expectation, this is how we need to act, this is the right thing to do, this is what we're doing, or even if you say, okay, you can play for a few more minutes, but it's time, but you get the correct behavior because they did it because they needed to do it and it was the right thing to do, and then you set up something, okay, I see this as a struggle, and you say, what we're going to do. Notice in the beginning of the year, sometimes they're not as excited about doing math or something, at least for my son. Sometimes he has to get in the rhythm. And so I decided to help encourage him to have the best attitude possible, that I would set up a system where on the days he does all his schoolwork with a good attitude, with minimal redirection, that I'm going to give him a sticker, you know, on his calendar. And when he has 3 days where he had a great attitude, then we're going to, you know, celebrate that. And I would let him pick like a Dr. John lollipop or something like that. And so it's setting up it ahead of time. And now if I were to every little thing, every problem you do for math, or every day you need to get a lollipop, like, you know, you got to know your kid and decide. Some kids, you know, you might have to start a little more and then wean down. But what I find is anytime I've set up some type of little reward or motivational system, it almost always fades out within a few weeks. Like, it's like sometimes they just need a little extra encouragement. And that's where, if it's enough to just redirect their behavior, set up the expectations, if it's enough to just verbally encourage them and give them that specific praise, saying what you're proud of them for, and, you know, kind of scaffolding and sitting beside them, then great, it stops there. But it's also good to set up rewards and be like, you know, I'm really proud of you today. Let's, you know, do this, like, or whatever. I want to give you this. You know, so there's those after the fact surprise ones, and then there's the setting up ahead so the child does have some type of expectation, but we're not dangling it over their head like while they're in the middle of a crisis. While we're in the middle of a crisis, we should be focusing on what's the expectation, and yes, there needs to be a consequence or some kind of redirection happening. Then they start to actually build intrinsic motivation, and they're not really caring about the sticker. The focus is on having a good attitude, and they start to realize, wow, this really feels good to have the right attitude. And then the other thing that I decided to do wasn't really necessary, but I decided that at Bible time, we're doing a lot more review. Like, I'm not adding new verses so much right now. It's just reviewing the old ones. And so I've always kind of, just to keep it easy for them and not make it stressful so that they don't feel any pushback with Bible time, they've always just loved to listen to me read the stories and listen to me like say the review verses, and then sometimes I'd encourage them to chime in, and they will. But I thought I want to increase their excitement to say the verses for me rather than me saying it. So if I am like reviewing a verse, I say, okay, what is, you know, 1 Peter 5:7? They're going to be excited to say it, because what I told them is, okay, we're going to make this like a game. When you say the review verse correctly, we're going to add a tally, and I just put a little stick on our memory verse Bible where we highlight verses we've learned from our memory verse box. And, you know, whether she says a verse that she knows, my daughter or my son, I add a tally. And as a group, when we get to 10 tallies, it doesn't matter who got the tally, we just group it into one place. Then we're gonna do a little celebration. I might let them get a Dr. John lollipop or some other little thing, a little candy bar or something. And so it's not like every time you say something, they have to hand you something. It's just kind of a little cherry on top. It doesn't have to be tangible either. If you feel like that's an issue for your kid, if they get too focused on the tangible, then you could, make it something else. Like, okay, whatever it is, like spin you around or do some extra this or that. So anyways, and then so we have the stickers, and then we have the tallies for the Bible thing. And the other thing, like I said, was the Lego points, or the points for reading, just to help them break through. So anytime I see something that maybe I'm trying to get over the hump with something, whether it's like a character thing or like just a motivational thing, or like moving up to something a little harder, setting up a little something to just encourage them has worked really well for us, and it always ends up fading out, and then it's something else that I'm focusing on, motivating them toward. Another thing that's been really helpful is that I decided to write down 2 focus things that I want them to work on with character, and to help myself remember, I write them on our dry erase board. Like number 1, first time obedience, and number 2 is for characters, working on just always remembering to have those manners. And those are something that's like ongoing. We should always be working on those. But if I notice a little slack with that, and I just, or other things, I might just write it on the board. I just started writing on the board recently, just to keep it a focus, and like for several weeks. And that was actually recommended by Simply Charlotte Mason, is to kind of keep the same 1 or 2 things for like a 6-week period or something like that, so that you kind of are able to kind of focus on that and really help them to create a habit. So those are my thoughts, and I hope this helps you as much as it helped me to just re-solidify the difference between bribery and rewarding, and to feel okay about rewarding your kids. And again, finding that balance between intrinsic motivation, so motivating them to do it because it's the right thing to do, versus extrinsic motivation. So we don't want to be so focused on, okay, I'm just doing it so I can get a lollipop, right? Then that's probably a sign we're over rewarding, or focusing on the reward instead of focusing on teaching your child to do something because it's the right thing to do and the value behind the thing. That should constantly be what we're talking and saying. So that's my priority, is really pointing to the heart, why we should be doing this, because it's the right thing, and why, and redirecting them and focusing on that, not the thing, not the object that they're trying to attain. That's kind of like an after the fact, like what we can look forward to. It might be mentioned, but it's not the focus. And it's sort of, because it's not the focus, and it's almost like they forget about it. But then when you do remember and are consistent, that if you set it up, that you provide that thing, then it's like a ripple effect. They just feel that encouragement from that, but also mainly just from us teaching them, loving them, and training them. And then it creates that desire to move forward, and they start to really feel good about that thing. They feel that growth. They see that growth in themselves. They're hearing you tell them about that growth that you're seeing, and they want to keep growing. Of course, it could be up and down a little bit. There's some days they might not feel like doing math, and other days they're like, oh, yay. And, that's life, right? We don't always feel like doing the things we have to do as moms. Have a wonderful time. I hope this year goes smooth for you, and that this was helpful.